This is a public meeting of the Indiana Arts Commission Advisory Review Panel convened to review applications submitted for the Regional Initiative Grants for fiscal year 2020. I am Karen Ellerbrook, Emeritus Commissioner from Indianapolis. Today is May 1, 2019, and we are in the Indiana Humanities Building in Indianapolis. We welcome applicants who may be part of our audience today and would like to remind you that there is to be no direct contact or conversation about the evaluation and disposition of applications before, during, or after the panel meeting. Be sure that all cell phones are silenced during the meeting today. At this time, we would like the panelists and staff to introduce themselves, stating their name, occupation, and where they are from in the state.
I'm Kathleen Atwell. I'm a retired historian. I'm from West Lafayette, Indiana.
My name is Stephen Conrad. I am the Foundation Relations Gift Officer at Newfields, and I'm from Indianapolis.
I'm Ursula David. I am a custom modern home builder in Indianapolis.
Deanna Polsna, ISC staff.
Karen Ellerbrook, IAC Emeritus Commissioner.
Stephanie Haynes, IAC staff, Indianapolis.
Heather Clausen, Grant Program Manager at Arts United up in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Chris Roberts, Operations Manager at the Columbus Area Arts Council in Columbus, Indiana.
Nancy Stark, Senior Manager of Education at Conner Prairie, which is in Fishers, although I personally live in Indianapolis.
Now we'll begin the panel review. This is how the process will work. I will announce the application we will review and ask the first reader to begin the discussion. The first reader will provide their assessment of the application based upon the evaluation criteria and their perspective. Panelists, please note that the application does not need to be recapped since everyone has read it. Just provide your comments. After the first reader is finished, I will ask the second reader to present any new, additional, or opposing comments. We are not looking for consensus, just a full evaluation from the different perspectives panelists bring to the table. After the second reader has finished, I will open the discussion to the full panel to offer their perspectives. Remember, in the interest of time, we are only looking for new, additional, or opposing viewpoints. If a panelist has a conflict of interest, we will ask that that panelist leave during the application's evaluation. Finally, once the application has been reviewed by the full panel, we will ask the panel to update their scores in the online system. It is common for scores to change as a result of this broader discussion. These scores save automatically. Are there any questions? Let's begin. Now we'll review application number 1, Actors Theater of Indiana, and our first reader is Nancy Stark.
Thank you. So looking through over organizational excellence, they obviously had a strong lineup of arts performances that they would do and impressive additional theater-related activity. There were a few questions, though, that I had in looking through some of the information there. One, I was wondering about the reasoning behind significant increase in sponsorships that they were anticipating for fiscal year 19, and I didn't see a lot of information that would tell me more. The other concerning thing was that their last strategic plan ended a few years ago, and so thinking that they need to work on that right away so that they have their plans for the future clearly outlined. The only other thing is I was wondering about the size of the board. It seemed a little bit small, and I was wondering about whether they should consider increasing to get more representation. As far as community engagement, I thought their narrative showed their process and the way that they get audience feedback. And they had a variety of ways to do that. They mentioned about increasing young adult 18 to 45 audience, and I was thinking that in addition to what they had said about feedback, that they should be sure to try and connect to people that age who are not currently connected to the theater, so they could maybe get more information about what it would take to encourage people not currently connected to their performances to come. They have, they offer performances that are free and special opportunities for students, so I thought they were working towards trying to make sure that there aren't too many financial barriers to experiencing what they have to offer. I would recommend that they maybe look too at some other underserved audiences to see if they can perhaps provide services or performances for, say, people with disabilities or other people like that that have underserved in their community. They're providing educational opportunities that are taught by practicing professionals, so to me, whenever I see that, that's always a strong service to provide. In looking at the things they provided for artistic quality, they provided the curriculum material for the Frog and Toad, which I thought was a really nice material for arts integration. At the same time, I wanted to see more because of knowing that they are a theatrical company and doing plays and performances. It would have been nice to see some of that to get a better feel for their what they have. I think that's about it. They obviously have a lot to offer the community. I thought in looking over the application that there was both in the performing venue as well as what they offer to students.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Heather Clausen is our second reader.
Yeah, so starting with organizational excellence, I agree a point that jumped out to me was the lack of a current strategic plan, but I did appreciate that they included information about what's currently going on with the points from their last plan, but again would benefit from having more detail about what the next steps might be with the organization. And in community engagement, I just had a few questions, and I don't know if maybe anybody else caught this somewhere else. I just needed a little more information about the middle and high school students. The application stated they were underserved, but not in what capacity, and I don't know if that's just because I'm unfamiliar with the school systems that were mentioned. So maybe a little more information there. But again, if anybody else caught that, please let me know. And then in regard to arts education, I really was really pleased to see the outcomes of the Soar program so well defined. And because those were so well defined, I was wanting a little bit more information about the outcomes of the other programs that were listed, just to echo some of the same outcomes, and maybe they're similar, but just a little more detail there. And then I thought that the artistic quality presented within the application was really informative. I loved the study guides as well, the brochure. It gave me what I thought was a really great peek into this organization and the high level of artistic quality that they presented. So,
All right, thank you, Heather. Now we'll open discussion to the panel for any additional or new comments.
Your mention of outcomes, I thought, that sounds familiar. I had it marked and I didn't mention it, but yes, that there were a couple of services. It's like, what is your direct outcome here?
And I agree with almost everything that was said, and the artistic qualities seems really high. I would just say the application can maybe be strengthened in community engagement, which focuses a lot on marketing and audience development, I think more so than like authentic two-way discussion with the community.
Okay, thank you.
And I had, the financials were blurry when I had trouble looking at them. I think they maybe scanned them or something. They weren't as crisp as I would have liked to see. I figured it out, but they were all blurry.
And I also had a note that one of the links they included was not the same link that was linked in their website. And so I would just caution, as with kind of the financial uploads, just to kind of go over everything and make sure the attachments and all the administrative things are correct before submitting.
Okay, thank you. Please finalize your scores, update your online comments, and sit back away from your computer so I know that you are finished. All right, thank you. The second one that we will review today is American Cabaret Theater Incorporated, DBA The Cabaret. Our first reader is Kathleen Atwell.
This is not my computer.
Yeah. Take your time.
I thought this organization was going through some great growth and opportunities to expand their influence through the rental of their space, and glad that they have control over their own space now, which they can do their programs when they want them and which programs they do. Engaging the NPC to facilitate the next strategic plan, I felt was a wise move because this organization has a small board for such a large organization. And I was impressed with their 2015-2017 strategic plans. A lot of the strategic plans left me a little cold. I admired the resolve to go deep rather than wide. I would have liked to have known a little more about the incubator series. What is it, how is it structured, and who are the participants? I did try to look on websites and Facebook, but didn't quite feel that I knew enough about that, and it sounded interesting. I am not sure that post-show surveys are the best way to understand an audience response. So this is a creative group of people, perhaps post-show gatherings or some other option rather than here's a survey, fill it out. Hopefully they have a new audience developments committee, and that maybe the audience development committee can come up with some inspired ideas how to look at their audience a little more, get a little more in-depth of what they wanted, what they saw, what they didn't see. I felt the audience for education was fairly narrow. Again, they're looking deep than wide. Those people are interested in performing. But this is a great opportunity for them, maybe something for students who don't know much about the theater and the variety of direction and an interest, what interest might take them. So an opportunity to engage with students who aren't already interested in acting might help with their arts education a little more. And second, all right, keep going. The arts quality. All of the media that they submitted and their website, their Facebook, all of those were quite impressive. The website was easy to move around and informative, and I'm of an older audience and I like to have websites that are easy to move around in. The Facebook page was up to date, and congratulations to their director, Shannon, for being recognized the Urban Times series titled Remarkable Women of the Arts. That speaks highly of that organization. So that's about all the comments I have. I did not know this organization, and at the end of the grant I felt that I had a better understanding of what they were doing.
Thank you, Kathleen. Second reader is Christopher Roberts.
I agree with a lot of Kathleen's feedback. I think that in going deep into the organization rather than wide, that sometimes there were some details in the narrative that were not necessary. And so I would kind of maybe watch that in the future, kind of keeping things tight. And I agree that the sorry, I got a little lost. Yeah, I also noticed as I was reading through that sections seem to have different kind of tones and different styles of writing, and that kind of threw me off, I think, a little bit. I did notice in education outcomes seemed very brief and vague, and so I wanted to kind of know more about what the goal of the programs were and how that would be measured. I also noticed that there was a highlight in the education section on one specific educator, but that not a lot of attention to any other people was given. In the artistic examples, the version of the email submitted that I looked at was kind of cut in between words, and so that was a little distracting, and the Facebook URL I got didn't work for me, so I had to kind of search for it independently. So again, I would kind of watch just to make sure everything is tightened up when submitting.
Thank you, Christopher. Now let's open it up to the panel for further discussion. Anyone?
I'm trying to find, oh, here we go. Okay, so for the arts education, just a quick thing, but I would have liked a little more information on the outcomes rather than the outputs. There was a lot of information about who, how many, but not as much detail on what those participants would be getting out of the programming. So I think for the arts education, I would have benefited from having a little more information about that. And then also, I thought that the incubator series, it really stood out to me as a really great example of the two-way engagement, and I would just encourage the organization to continue, kind of echoing what was said earlier, continue finding those deeper levels of two-way engagement within their other programs that they have.
Okay, thank you. Please finalize your scores, update your online comments, and sit back, glance at me when you're finished. Okay. The third organization is American Pianists Association, and our first reader is Stephen Conrad.
Okay, so for the first section, organizational excellence, everything about mission and history and purpose is all very clear. The organization outlined plans to engage new constituent groups and to sort of enhance its national reputation, and gave good examples by programming at Lincoln Center and in LA, which all sounded great. I thought the application could have been more specific, and if these are going to be repeated programming, these are just one-off and done, things like that. In terms of board, the application states that they're striving for diverse representation of the community, but there wasn't a lot of specific information given on demographics or plans to cultivate board members of different demographics. And finances all seemed really strong. Everything was balanced, and in fact there was fairly high net profits in the budget, especially after endowment was applied to the bottom line towards the end. So I would just be interested in knowing if they're reinvesting that, or if they're, you know, creating a cash reserve or anything like that. Because I think there was net profits of about over $600,000 each year, which was over 1,000% more than budgeted net income. Community engagement. The application states that they're trying to engage more young professionals as one target audience, but I don't know if there was, you know, they provided a slate of programming where they're like identifying real target audience, I think, clearly. Let's see. As far as evaluating representing diverse participation in the community, the evidence was audiences becoming noticeably more diverse, but it's unclear to what extent this represents overall community engagement or if that's being surveyed or anything like that. And then finally, sorry, I'm having a hard time scrolling. Oh, I thought the application was really clear and concise about how the organization gleans feedback from those currently benefiting from their programs, so that was very concise. For arts education, I thought concerto curriculum was really well explained, easy to understand, and it's benefiting school-age students with, as it puts, at schools have limited funding to sustain high-quality music programs, which is very admirable. Obviously, the pianists are of world class and of high artistic caliber to be engaging with students. I would be interested to know if if there's training or anything about, I don't know to what extent the artists have experience teaching young students, especially with limited exposure or his backgrounds in music. So I think that'd be a great addition to the program, training, or just an explanation if it already happens. Let's see. In general, I would like more information in arts intended outcomes of the arts education. Obviously, it's great exposure to music and inspiring for school-age students to be, you know, in the presence of great performers. I'm not sure what specific skills or training or anything like that goes on during it, other than general exposure to a highly skilled professional. And towards the end, artistic quality. I think it's very evident all of the pianists coming to Indiana through this program are of the top possible quality, so I think it's just a great organization to have for the state. Performances are open to the public at large. The Eskenazi program is great. All the programs are entirely based in music and the arts, and promotional materials, social media demonstrate commitment to high quality music experiences. The website and everything was totally up to date and seemed really active.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Ursula, David?
Yes. In regards to community engagement, there really wasn't anything about how they do evaluate. It was only mentioned that they will get feedback, so not very specific. As far as the arts education, as I already said, there were no specific outcomes that are noted except that people are inspired. So it could have been more specific there. And in agreement with you, I think more detail is needed regarding the trainers.
Okay, thank you, Ursula. Now we'll open it up to all the panelists to comment if you would like.
One thing I noted about the board is that it seemed like if this was a national organization, there should be more geographic diversity on the board. It seemed like they're mostly from central Indiana, so if they're looking for a a national reputation, that might be an area to work on.
And to that same point, Stephen briefly mentioned it, that they're working to increase the diversity of the board, but I would be interested to know in more detail about how that diversity matches the diversity of the population that they're serving as well. But I was really impressed by the strong interview process that they had in place for the board.
Okay, thank you all. Please finalize your scores, update your online comments, and let me know when you're finished. Okay, thank you. The fourth organization is Art with a Heart, and Heather is our first reader.
I thought, starting with organizational excellence, I thought that the organization features really robust programming that had several community partnerships, which I think is beneficial to pair with the programming, which I found to be diverse in what was offered, as well as impressed by all of the programs actually truly aligning with the mission. I would be interested in knowing how the board does currently represent the communities that are being served. The experience makeup of the board is really good. And I thought that it was diverse in backgrounds of board members. And I found it reassuring to see that the organization recognizes their current challenges and acknowledge the fact that they need to diversify their income sources. And I think that the addition of a professional development member to their staff will be really beneficial to the organization. They were not operating currently under a strategic plan, so I would have just liked some information about the successes or challenges that they found with the most recently completed plan, and then if there is any information about the upcoming plan that would have been beneficial to understand the organization on a deeper level. Community engagement, they very well defined the communities that they wanted to see increased participation from, and I just encourage them to keep finding deeper levels of engagement. What programs that you're up, I just threw some questions in here. What programs do those that you serve find most valuable? What areas do they think that you could improve upon? Is there a program that could be reinvigorated to better serve your target demographics? And again, I noted that the addition of a development director was a step in the right direction to be able to have staff dedicated to different areas within the organization. And I love that the arts education was prepackaged, basically, so it just made it really simple for educators to implement it into their classrooms, which I think just is a really nice thing, and it makes the programming more accessible to those who are wanting to use it. But again, would have welcomed a little more information about the qualifications of those that were developing and providing the activities. How are they engaged with the programming throughout the process? The volunteers that are used, how are they recruited? What are their qualifications? Is there training provided? So again, just would have appreciated a little more detail in regard to that. And then for artistic quality, I thought that the documentation that was provided supported a high level of artistic quality, had plenty of information about the programming, So it was easy for me to understand within the application, but also I feel as though had I just seen the artistic documentation, I would still know what was going on. And I just thought the look of everything was clean and made it easy to navigate for the general public, which is always good.
Thank you, Heather. A second reader, Stephen.
Yes, I don't have a ton to add. I agree with almost everything Heather has said already. For the first section in organizational excellence, I also appreciate how transparent the organization was in their challenges with strategies to try to remediate some of those issues. I know that the board is, increasing, or they're trying to increase the board in size, so just general information about what types of additions they're hoping to make, I think would have been helpful. I know that the director of development is a grant-funded position for a year, I believe it was described, so I was wondering if the board already has some sort of dedicated fundraising committee, a development committee, things like that can sustain any relationships or new grants that are obtained in this 1 year director of development position. In terms of finances, I would have liked to, everything's explained pretty well with the exception of in fiscal year 18. I know that CICF funding was reduced, it's all explained. Also in fiscal year 18, the budgeted income from events and donations were just extremely high compared to the outcomes. And fiscal year 19 seems more realistic. I would just like to know what else happened with funding, or if the budget was just really inflated for fiscal year 18. Community engagements. As far as community engagement and arts education are concerned, the organization is inherently dedicated to arts education and community engagement. One target audience they identified as, or I guess volunteers, just increasing volunteerism, which I think is really smart, and if successful, it can help sustain the scope of their programming when they're trying to balance the budget. And then artistic quality, I have nothing more to add other than the application gives me a Facebook link, which is fine. I'm just wondering why the organization doesn't also use Twitter or Instagram or other forms of social media that can engage a broader audience.
Thank you, Stephen. Any other comments?
The mission that they stated in the grant is not the mission that they state on their website. So you need to figure out which one they're going to use. And then I had some trouble with their website, and it could be my computer's over. At the very bottom, there was gobbledygook words and stuff that wasn't there. So that was a little disconcerting, but I was needing to figure out what mission they want to run under.
I totally missed that.
Were they really different missions, or just
They
like different
weren't
words?
real different,
Oh.
but they were different. And so, I mean, words, I mean, it almost seemed like for the grant, they tweaked it a little bit to sound more grant. This is, I don't know, it just was enough, it was enough that it made me stop and look back and forth. I had that.
Any other comments? Okay, thank you. Please finalize your scores, and if you want to update an online comment, do it now. Okay. All right, the fifth organization name is ArtMix Incorporated, and Christopher is our first reader.
I really appreciated the clear and concise description of the organization's activities, and also the range of experiences on the board and the narrative content on how board members are vetted so that they are representing the community. I did note in the financials that there was a significant shortfall from budget to actuals in city government and foundation support that they didn't explain, but they did provide details of how they, or kind of an overview of how they want to recover in the future. I thought that their community engagement was specific with their target populations and their goals on how to expand participation for those groups while also adding additional programs. I think some of the wording like multifaceted process and a variety of ways was a bit too vague for me to really get at what they were doing. But I did like the data about the participants and the demographic information, and I thought it strengthened this section. In arts education, I noticed that the formatting did not follow the guidelines provided, and so that kind of set up a wall of text that I found difficult to parse. I did find all of the information there, it just wasn't formatted the way that I expected. It also threw me off a little that outcomes were really tied closely to previous experience and seemed kind of like presumptions based on that experience rather than goals for the future. And let's see, with artistic documentation, I noticed that the photos were fuzzy in the attachment they included. I'm not sure of the reason for that. And the Facebook URL provided was incorrect for the organization. But that overall, it really, the examples provided centered on stakeholders and who they were serving. It really brought the audience to the forefront.
Thank you, Christopher. Our second reader is Nancy.
So, yeah, going back to organizational excellence, I had some wondering about some of the budget as well. It seemed like it doesn't explain some things like the fee for service drops a lot between fiscal year 18 and 19, and I don't know if I just wasn't reading the budget right or not, because I thought the narrative indicated that foundation support was characterized as slightly higher, but it seems significantly higher, so I was wondering whether that was a likely increase or what justified that expectation. Let's see. Community engagement. I don't know, a lot to pretty much summarize that group of what I have. I wondered, I did want to check in though about, you were mentioning the outcomes, and I didn't notice, could you explain a little bit more what your concern was with the outcomes?
There were, sorry.
No, that's okay. I knew there, when I was looking, I was going, oh, I did not.
And they did have outcomes, so that's not what I'm
Okay.
saying.
It says under letter C, included in a description.
Mhm.
So instead of following the format,
Yeah,
that the
but
application.
Yeah, but I thought there was something else that he was concerned about with
Yes.
the way, and I didn't notice that, so I wanted to make sure I wasn't just missing something or if I took something differently.
and it wasn't a huge detail, it just seemed that they were, rather than talking about it as outcomes, it was more like reporting what had happened in the past. So it was, I think really the wording kind of threw me off, and it didn't make me think of outcomes in the way that I expected to think of
Oh, okay.
outcomes. Does that make sense?
Okay, sure, and I guess I was just taking it that they had some actual data that showed that this increased. And so that was impressive to me, because often these are our outcomes, but actually having data that defines it is harder to come across, so, but I understand now what you were saying, okay.
Okay, any other comments?
In regard to the arts education, I just would have liked a little more information about the teaching artists and what their specific qualifications were. It was a little vague for me, so.
In terms of the budget, the one thing that sort of jumped out to me was board giving, which just seemed low compared to the board's size. I think it's at $5,000 a year. That could be easily explained in the narrative. I don't think it was, but there might be opportunity to engage a larger board if it's not a board that can give a lot financially every year. And I just wanted to commend the application on really thoroughly explained, and it sounds like they're doing a really great evaluation process and talking with their constituents, and everything's evaluated both qualitatively and quantitatively, which is a strong component of this application.
Anyone else? Okay, please finalize your scores. Update online comments. Okay, our sixth organization name is Booth Tarkington Civic Theater. Nancy is our first reader.
Thank you. There's under organizational excellence, just showing the Civic Theater's extensive history and performance offerings. So it starts out strongly in that their board recruitment seems well thought out. The budget figures and outlook I was not clear about. It just seemed like there was a listing to achieve a large increase in income from individual contributions and corporate sponsorships and subscriptions, but not information on how they were going to do that. So that made me a little bit uncertain. Again, a strategic plan is from 2 years ago, so wondering also, they did provide somewhat of an update, but it was unclear to me what the timeline was for that, because in the graphic, the timeline says 2017, but in some of the other things, it has different years. So that I thought was a bit confusing, and trying to figure out where they're standing right now and what their timeline is for certain accomplishments. Community engagement, they did identify 2 specific groups that they were looking for increased participation. They outlined process for input, generally involving those who were already connected with the organization. So I would encourage them to look at getting input again from groups that they don't currently have a relationship with. So instead of their patrons or ticket holders, that they look to do some sort of reaching out to community through focus groups or other things that would allow them to reach out to people and hear from people that maybe don't attend their performances. I thought they showed very purposeful efforts to be inclusive and accessible and serving a wide variety of needs in the community, including reaching out to those that have economic need as well as those that might have disabilities or mobility challenges. The other thing I thought was very strong was they're getting input from a variety of community partners in an effort to serve those audiences well. Arts education, they do offer a range of experiences and programs for a variety of audiences. So I thought that was strong, and that they did identify some outcomes. Again, having instructors include the performers that have extensive background in the performing arts is a strong component for providing some valuable educational opportunities. I thought the video gave a good overview of all their work they're doing, and that their materials were attractive, lots of social media use. I thought that their promotional efforts that I saw that they provided information or links to seemed to generate an excitement. So overall, I thought the application reflected a strong commitment to developing compelling performances, making them available to the community, and also offering experiences that give students opportunities not to just develop theater skills, but also life skills.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Kathleen, second reader.
Let me see. I did had some concerns with the strategic plans that did not have a timeline. And to me, it sounded more like a wish list than a plan. It's like, we want to do this, but no real how we're going to get there. And I had questions. I didn't understand the in-kind expenses on line 28 and 31 of the budget. I would have liked, when they were going through the budget, a little more explanation. It was high, and I didn't understand what an in-kind expense. I just didn't understand because I'm not familiar with theater. So I need to understand that not all of us are familiar with the theater. So everything else was just about what she was saying. It was fun. The move to Carmel will be an interesting challenge and opportunities for them.
Other comments? Thank you, Kathleen.
I had trouble understanding the financial sustainability or just the financial status of this organization. The budgets I thought made sense, but it does seem like they're operating with net losses every year. It's not really explained how that difference is made up in the narrative. The operating income every year is a negative number, which I think were their net losses. And in general, it just seems like, that could be explained. I'm not sure if they need to reduce programming to prevent future net losses, anything like that. It's just not addressed what they're doing to balance the budgets.
I agree. Yeah, I noted that there was a significant decrease in FY18 for earned and contributor income, and then they're also anticipating a decrease in 19. But again, it just wasn't explained in the narrative. Wow. If there was a plan to make that income more sustainable.
Okay, thank you. Please finalize scores and update online comments if needed. Stephen, are you ready? Okay, thank you. The 7th. We're on the 7th organization, Carmel Symphony Orchestra. Stephen is our first reader.
Great. The organization's history, purpose, mission, everything's really clearly outlined in a way that's very understandable. It's great that the board's giving 100%. I also think it's really encouraging that the board includes both like music experts as well as nonprofit management experts and things like that. It doesn't actually, so there's a great diversity in areas of expertise. The application acknowledges the board doesn't currently demonstrate gender parity, so at least they're transparent and are working to fix that. There's not a ton of super specific details about how they're going to work to fix that, so it's great to be transparent, of course. I appreciate it. I just like more details on how it's being addressed to make the board more representative of the organization's community. It was good that so much of their strategic plan upload has already been completed, so hopefully the board can prioritize updating it. I believe this one is also out of date. In terms of the budget, fiscal year 18 showed a cash deficit of $40,000. The organization provided insight about how the center changed its ticketing sales or how ticket sales are reported. I still was left unclear if that's the cause of the $40,000 deficit in fiscal year 18. And then the organization is projecting an increase of over $100,000 in cash income in 19. So that's great. I just would like more explanation of how that will be accomplished. For community engagements, the organization somewhat lists target audience, not super clearly who they're trying to increase engagement with. They listed that they presented a concert for active duty and veteran members, which sounds like a good program. It didn't indicate whether or not the program was planned or evaluated with input from the active duty or veteran members of the community. And I'm not sure if CSO is planning on replicating or repeating that program again. I don't know if veterans were a target audience or not, but it was an example of a recent community engagement effort. I think the other target population indicated was just well, it stated community at large, but it seemed focused on making sure families feel welcome to participate, younger, families with kids, things like that. There are, I think the most clearly seen community engagement is the free school programs. Free outdoor concerts, of course, are super accessible. Those are all great. I think the plan to reach 100,000 residents is exciting. The outdoor festival, the optics I think are a little challenging, that you can pay for a better experience and the rest of the community would have like a peripheral one of the outdoor festival if you're unable to pay. And the organization indicates that they solicit feedback from ticket buyers, and they seem to respond and evaluate that feedback. It's just it's unclear if there's any front-end evaluation with the community in terms of planning this big festival. Things like that make it a little more two-way. For arts education, the organization seems to have strong ties with its local schools. Students of all ages are benefiting, and there's even mentoring of adult musicians, so there's a diversity in their offerings there. So arts education seems broad, especially things like every single fifth grader in Carmel Clay school districts. It's not explained really specifically in the application, but I think I assume that these programs are reaching underserved students within the school district as well. In terms of learning objectives, I'd like more specific examples of skills and trainings. I'm not sure what the learning outcomes are for programs like the instrument petting zoo. If there's educational objectives for the young artist competition. Let's see. Sounds exciting. I thought was the best example of listed. There's state curricular standards involved in that program, so I thought that was their best example of well thought out arts education. In general, and in this whole section, I think it's really clear that CSO is actively trying to provide a lot of positive experience with orchestral music, reaching the community, students like that. I don't think the organization can claim that hearing music in a space with proper acoustics is more meaningful than studying or playing music in school, and specifically for the arts education section. And then the very last section, artistic quality. I thought all of the promotional materials links seemed of high quality. Social media are really well followed as well. Large followings, everything's up to date. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Christopher's our second reader.
I agree with a lot of what Stephen has said. I found as I read through the narrative, there were places where I thought there were a lot of administrative or internal details that weren't relative to the prompt, and sometimes, just a lot of kind of cluttered things that weren't necessary for us, the grant review panel, to know. I also was confused about the financials with the last year's expenses exceeding income, and a proposed doubling of earned income was, I think, not explained. And in community engagement, there were populations identified, but the goals I thought were quite vague, and that the survey results that they reported collecting weren't really translated into clear action items. I thought I liked the descriptions of all the arts education programming that was offered. I thought that where barriers are concerned to access, that there was a lot of language kind of assuming access to the internet and transportation and kind of a cultural or educational background, and that there wasn't a lot leading other underserved populations to the organization. Outcomes were a quote from the NEA, and that was quite vague. So I would really like to see some more information about what is proposed people will get out of these programs. And I think that's the bulk of my commentary.
All right, thank you, Christopher. Other comments?
Well, I just would say that I really enjoyed on their website, they had Symphony 101, and I thought that was very creative. Because some people are turned off with going to Symphony because they might not know how to act. So I enjoyed that. I thought that was nice.
I thought too, when they mentioned, you know, if you have access to the internet, then we've got this, and it kind of seemed like, do they realize that some people don't have access to the internet? So I was wondering if they thought about partnering with a library or someplace where there would be public access to that. I think they mentioned this several times in the application, but I think it's worth noting that, you know, they encourage families with even young children to come to symphony concerts, and I think that's a great way to bring that to a variety of people who might not ordinarily get that. The other thing I was going to mention is they mentioned the 2020 festival, and it certainly does seem like a big event, and I would hope that, and they even mentioned this, I think, that they use that to get information from the community about how they can best serve them.
Other comments?
No, just one quick thing. I just would encourage, I suppose, the audience or the organization with such a great focus on child-friendly, family-friendly experiences. I just noted that the promotional flyers and email materials that were going out weren't engaging to younger audiences. So there seemed to be a disconnect between wanting to offer family-friendly events and then having the promotional materials appear as, if that makes any sort of sense. Yeah, they seemed targeted toward an older demographic, I suppose is the best way to put that. So just encourage you to consider that.
Thank you. Okay, please finalize your scores. Add an online comment if you need to. Okay. I was going to take one more organization before we broke for a restroom break. Is that all right with everyone, or are we needing to quit sooner than, okay. Okay. And yes, recuse, please, Stephen and Christopher, for this one. This is number 8. The organization name is Dance Kaleidoscope. And Kathleen, you are first, please.
I was glad to see that they hired an accountant and that it was a nonprofit specialty accountant. I think that was very important. The strategic plan was informative, but I didn't find that it had specific action items, how and when the goals would be reached. I also recognize that them recognizing staff turnover is important because it seems that Mr. Hockey showed up in every activity, from teaching in the classroom to pre-performance discussions. He's going to be one hard person to replace, so I'm glad they are looking forward-looking in how to deal with that. They received the $5 million grant from the Lilly Endowment. Speaks volumes for their quality of the organization, and I felt they had good partnership with other organizations, and I found their financials a clear explanation of their financials. Down with the community engagement, I felt like they're trying to reach out to new audiences and other community organizations. I'm not convinced spending limited resources on elderly people instead of young adults will grow their audience. And it's good that they're reaching out to elderly people, but those resources aren't going to grow an audience. I'm glad to see they're working with the school, Indiana School for the Blind and Visually Impaired, and cooperating with other from concept through implementation and evaluation. I have worked with the Indiana School for the Blind and Visually Impaired, and it's wonderful to see them doing that. I enjoyed learning about the public dance classes and the summer park workshop. I think they're a great resource for energy and enthusiasm for learning to appreciate the art of dance and hopefully create lifelong participants and audiences. Each program seemed well thought out, and the narratives I found very informative. And the products, the artistic quality, I thought all were excellent. So I enjoyed reading the grant and enjoyed learning about their activities.
Thank you, Kathleen. Ursula, next.
I'm going to be short and sweet. I thought it was excellent. I felt like it was the best application that I read. They did a great job.
Thank you. Other comments?
I just wanted to say that I appreciate how they're approaching reaching those new audiences through business-driven and artistic ways. I think that'll really help them reach that target participant that they're looking for.
I did have a question regarding the budget, and I was going to pull it up real quick to make sure. A couple things. One, they listed their number of full-time paid staff as 26, and I really wondered
I
about
think
that.
that must include dancers.
Yes.
Because I had
Maybe
that up.
full-time
And then-
equivalent.
Right,
Right, okay.
that was the dancers also, rather
Right,
than-
and I think they noted that in there, did they not?
I don't think they
mentioned
did.
no, they mentioned that there were
Okay.
dancers, but
Right,
whether
because
that's what they
I had
were.
to go back and I
Yeah.
caught that same thing,
Um,
whoa, that's a big staff, and then,
But the other thing, and let me pull this up real quick just to make sure that I'm not making this up, but when I looked at the budget, it seemed like there was a drop in admission ticket income from actual 2018 to budget 2019 that wasn't consistent with the narrative that talked about increases in ticket sales. And I just wondered why they would have done that. Let me double check, but it shows admissions ticket income that fiscal year 2018 is 90,000, and the fiscal year 19 budget, or 2018 is 90,000, and the fiscal year 2019 budget's only 65,000. And so I just wasn't clear to me why there would be that big drop.
Okay, thank you. Please finalize your scores. Online comments added if needed. And you may take a break now. What, 10 minutes?
Let's take 10 minutes, yeah.
10 minute
That'll be 3:13, we'll reconvene.
sorry.
Oh, you're good.
Hi, how are you?
All right, we've returned from a short break, and we are ready for number 9, Fine Arts Society of Indianapolis, DBA Classical Music, Indy. Heather is our first reader.
Thanks. Overall, I found this application to be a strong application for organizational excellence. I thought that their outreach and educational programs spanned across a wide variety of audiences, and that they were representative of the Indianapolis population. And when looking at their strategic plan, I found, excuse me, I lost my place. They carried out, had established and carried out a good timeline for accountability, and then they've done the same for their upcoming plan. And the board appeared to be diverse in variety of expertise, but I would have appreciated a little more information supporting how those individuals are representative of the area served by the organization, because I'm unfamiliar with the makeup of Marion County. But I was in awe of the high level of giving that was demonstrated by the board, and pleased to see that there's 100% board support. And down in community engagement, found that they clearly defined who they wish to target for participation in their programs, but would have liked a little more information defining what underserved meant, right? There's multiple demographics within the underserved population. So when they referenced underserved children, I wasn't sure if that was low-income youth, youth with disabilities. So just a little more information about that would have been helpful. And based off of the narrative, I assumed them to be low-income youth, but again, I just had to make an assumption. I did have a question if Indianapolis Public Schools was helping this organization in extending the reach to the low-income youth of the area. I'm unfamiliar with the school system, so I would have appreciated a little bit of connection between the two entities. I found that although the belief of the organization is that classical music is for everyone, I would challenge the organization to connect on a deeper level, simply than presenting opportunities and then gathering feedback. Just really focusing on that two-way engagement and finding out what it is that the community wants, and just asking yourself questions about and ensuring that the programming is crafted as a result of that communication with the underserved populations. For arts education, the programming appeared to be highly engaging and it was aligned with the organization's mission. When answering the question of what specific training and skills and abilities or knowledge that those benefiting would gain, so the outcomes, percentages were included, but no information was presented about how these percentages would be captured or measured. So just a little more information about the metrics that you're using to gauge the outcomes would have been helpful to me. And for artistic quality, I found the materials included in the application to be high quality. They appropriately displayed the IIC and NEA logos, which was nice to note. And I found the website to be neat and organized in a fashion that was easy to navigate for me personally. And then I would just encourage the organization to further leverage Instagram. As I went through the Instagram feed, it was primarily still images. And I feel like with the focus of music, maybe we could utilize that platform to really engage and capture audiences by presenting music through social media, as opposed to just images of music. But overall, strong application.
Thank you, Heather. Nancy, second reader.
Sure. Going backwards a little bit, since that's where I am. As far as artistic quality, I thought the magazine that they publish is noteworthy. It provides some really nice coverage of the local classical music scene and might provide information that people wouldn't necessarily know. Let's see. I think Heather's comment is an important one, that people that are viewing these might not know things that would seem obvious, like Indianapolis Public Schools serving a lot of students with economic need, but if you're not from Indianapolis, you wouldn't know that. So that in any of these, it's important to not just figure, oh, of course, people know this. Think about, will people know this, and explain it further so that it is clear to the panelists. Let's see. I thought they showed good management practices in that they were aiming to have their next strategic plan developed and ready just as the current one is ending. So that showed good vision for planning.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Other comments?
One thing that really stood out to me that I appreciated was when I went to their Facebook site, there's a pin post at the very top supporting the tonic ball. Is that what it's called?
Yes.
A fundraiser for second helpings, which I thought just demonstrates, even as simple as a shared Facebook post, it shows, I think, good community engagement, uplifting direct service organizations through the arts. I really appreciate that. The one question I had, and maybe someone can help, was $168,000 from a web radio project that wasn't in for budgeted income but popped in to fiscal year 18. I just wasn't sure what that was. So I don't know if anyone noticed that as well or has an answer, but that was just the one question I had on the budget was, what was that income? And is it repeated every year?
Other comments? Okay, please finalize your scores. Update online comments. Ready? Okay. Number 10 is the Harrison Center for the Arts Incorporated. Christopher's our first reader.
I thought in terms of the organizational description that the narrative was very thorough. I did, as I read through, have some confusion because I think that there are particular projects that are a big part of what the organization does, and so the narrative kind of went off in that direction, and I had a hard time figuring out what the core of the organization was. The strategic plan I thought was sufficient, but the narrative really didn't provide any details to support that document upload. And there was a similar situation with the finances, that the narrative was very short and that I had questions about the financial documents that weren't answered there. In terms of the art education, community engagement, that the target audience is identified and that the idea, inclusion, diversity is very important for this population, or for this organization, because the predominant community that the narrative describes is an underserved community. It sort of brought up some kind of philosophical questions on how, if this underserved population is the target and the main population served, how others that the organization is kind of fighting against in this project can be included, and so I think that that's something for them to consider and maybe address. The arts education narrative did not follow the formatting, and so I thought it was also kind of confusing because it did mention that at one point Heron High School had been a part of the organization. I couldn't quite figure out whether it was still or not. It said that it wasn't, but it also mentioned it really prominently in the arts education section. I thought the outcomes mentioned were really broad, and that I don't remember seeing any qualifications of the educators or the curriculum leaders, and I think that that would have helped to strengthen this education section. In terms of the artistic quality, I think that the provided examples were of really high quality in design. Their website was easy to navigate, provided a lot of information, and social media was interesting, but I thought engagement was fairly low. And overall, I think that I had some doubts as to how the organization's priorities all overlapped and existed within one entity, since it deals with art education and community activism.
Thank you, Christopher. Kathleen, second reader.
Well, really the one thing that I thought was interesting, again with the arts and community, with that Monon 16, I went online and Googled that and learned about that, and I thought that was a great program, because I know communities change quickly, and to have people who have been there a long time to be able to engage them and get their stories, I thought that, I like that. Everything else, I felt that as an arts organization, they were doing a bang-up job. I did question, and I got my answer, that on the building it said that there was a church, yet none of the narratives said it was church-related, and my understanding is that it's just they share facilities and that they don't overlap in programming, so that helped. Because they didn't mention it, but it was on the front of the building. But I got that figured out. So, yeah, that's all.
Anyone else? Comments?
I thought the connection to the local neighborhoods was really, really cool. Short and sweet.
I also thought, as far as community engagement, it showed a really robust program in terms of engaging local residents in planning and participating and evaluating the programs they're doing. The one portion I was just more curious about, I guess, would go towards the budget, but their Lilly Endowment grant, it was $2.7 million, I think. That was addressed. I'm just curious what exactly is being, I would believe it was a capital grant for the building, and I'm just interested in knowing more about what's changing, and if once the project's done and there's building enhancements and upgrades, how the operating budget is going to support those. And maybe there's part of the grant that's going to deferred maintenance in the future, I'm not sure. But I would just like more details about what exactly that project is.
Thank you. Please finalize your scores. Update online comments. Stephen is leaving us again.
You know people.
Okay. Number 11 is Heartland Film Incorporated. And Ursula, you are our first reader.
As far as the organizational excellence, it's always disappointing to see when an organization doesn't have 100% board participation support. Their profits were down. Expenses were up compared to the budget and the actual, and they seem to have a lot of money from a large sustainability grant, but it seems clear they need to do more to create more income. As far as the community engagement, I thought they were doing a great job in engaging the community and knowing who their participants are. They go so far as to actually have an outreach coordinator and an educational outreach program that works in ways to reach out to other diverse groups, which is something I haven't seen in some of the other organizations, so I was impressed by that. As far as the arts education, they do a lot of things to educate participants in their particular craft and beyond what they actually do as well. I found that they were reaching out to underserved and diverse groups. One thing that I felt was a little lacking was their response to planned outcomes. The only thing I saw there that gave me any indication was that people would gain insight and knowledge, which I thought maybe we could have something a little more specific. As far as the artistic quality, I think everything that I saw online and the links they provided were good. I thought they did a great job, and they should, since they are Heartland Film, you would think they could put together some great websites and Facebook.
Thank you, Ursula. Heather is our second reader.
Yeah, there was a point mentioned in the strategic plan from 2017, which is the current one still, that details wanting to accurately track and reflect attendance numbers, but then there's no supporting information on if progress was made. And I just think that that's a really valuable piece of information. Not only for this organization, but there are organizations elsewhere that would benefit from learning more about that particular piece. So would just be interested to know more of what they had found out and where they are currently in their plan. And I just had I guess it just sort of reiterates what was said before. I just wanted further clarification for the budget. I wanted to know if the restricted and unrestricted line items, I didn't know a number, but if they were relied upon annually, and then just wanted more information about the sustainability grant, because if it's not a reliable and sustainable source of income, it's a concern, I suppose, that it's covering about a quarter of the total expenses at this point. So just would be interested to know more about how they're working to increase and diversify their revenue streams. I really appreciated all the statistical information within the narrative. It helped to define what underserved audiences they were hoping to reach. And I also was pleased to see that there were partnerships being formed with diverse communities, and that those partnerships and relationships were being built around specific programs. So that's all I have to add.
Thank you, Heather. Further comments?
I had a comment. They don't have 100% board giving. Their board, most of them, like 9 members are just 1 year in, and none are at 2 years. And as they may challenge to get their board members up to speed and working with, they haven't been on the board very long, and that's a large number with just 1 year. And that maybe is why they don't have 100% giving, but that's something they need to look at and really work towards. Because if your board doesn't give to you, it's hard to convince other people to do it.
Thank you. Others?
I thought noteworthy was their road show that travels around the state. I thought that was a good thing. I was disappointed in the documentation video that they attached to because I was thinking Heartland Film Festival, truly moving pictures, and I was expecting more of that in the video, so I was a little disappointed in that. But overall, a lot of the activities they describe are obviously focused on their mission and doing a lot of things to further filmmaking and film appreciation.
One additional comment, in their narrative, they mention that the board chair and vice chair have deep experience in relationships in the Indianapolis nonprofit and business communities, but then they didn't expand on that. So just the inclusion of that line made me wonder how those relationships are positively benefiting the organization.
Okay, let's finalize the scores and make a comment or change a comment if you need to. Okay, the 12th organization is the Hoosier Salon Patrons Association Incorporated. Nancy, you're our first reader.
So just starting out on some of the narrative, they provided an impressive list of organizational and other partners that they work with. And they did say that they were planning to seek more diversity in their future board development. And in regard to that, it looked like the board was mostly central Indiana, so I was thinking with a statewide organization, it seems like there should be more varied locations represented. Also, in looking at arts education and looking at the board, it wasn't totally sure, but it seemed like the board could be enhanced by having someone from the K-12 community, an educator or administrator that's familiar with and from that group. The membership, the artist membership, did reflect, according to the narrative, geographic diversity from a lot of different, and I appreciated their mention of being able to facilitate interactions between older artists and younger artists to the benefit of both. Let's see. I was thinking that they should consider how their inclusion diversity efforts will meet statewide community needs relating to areas such as ethnicity and culture or disability. Because it seems like serving the artist community, certainly you would want to reach out to those, but also that if you're serving the artist community, to effectively do that, you need to seek input from the overall community. So just would encourage that. As far as arts education, I thought, again, the partnerships are impressive, and the exhibition and the different skill level workshops they have, I think, certainly benefit the community. I would have liked more information on their reaching underserved audiences and regarding the outcomes for the participants in the summer program that they offered. They mentioned that they were looking into more student programming and we're going to do some research on where they might fit in, and I thought that was commendable, that not just jumping in because, oh, of course you want to educate students, but that how important it is to find out what else is going on and where are we uniquely positioned to contribute. And I would encourage in that effort, that research, that direct input from student populations should be collected. I thought the website and the promotional materials help reflect the beauty of the art that's produced in Indiana. And again, we'd just like to see more effort to connect to underserved audiences related to a variety of areas like income and culture.
Thank you, Nancy. Ursula is our second reader.
Yes, couple of things I would add is, although they are working on a new strategic plan, all we were given is sort of a broad list of what they plan to work toward. So I couldn't tell if any goals were met or not. As far as community engagement, they have a strategy for planning and how to get people to participate, but I didn't see any evaluation strategy. And one other thing to note on the artistic education, they talk about workshops and who specifically will benefit, but the only thing that they tell us about teachers is that they make mention of, they refer to recommendations from their board members rather than talking about who teaches.
Thank you. Other comments?
Well, was confused. Sometimes they use an acronym HAS and other times HSPA, and I'd like some consistency because I kept going, well, it's the same organization, and I'd scroll up to the top and read the name and come back down. Some consistency in that. And also I found that 24,000 and other income for 24,000, I'd like a little better explanation. It's just other income. That's a pretty high number for just hoping we have other income.
Other comments?
I would just encourage a little more clarity in the arts education section. I personally, I just had a difficult time even deciphering who would benefit, because there's mention of these workshops being for the Hoosier Salon artists, but then it moves on to seem as though it's more inclusive of other people. So I just a little more clarity would have been helpful to making that easier to understand.
And I was wanting a little more explanation about, it was mentioned that the Carmel Gallery was closed, which represented a significant savings. I was kind of curious what the actual breakdown was for that, considering that also cost a Hamilton County grant to be lost. And then just small, like nitpicking note, but there's a pinned post on top of Facebook that's for a Carmel Gallery exhibition from last October. So now that it's closed especially, I think that just needs more attention to detail updating the social media.
Okay. Please finalize scores and update your comments if needed. Are we ready?
I'm ready for that. I'm ready
Okay.
for the next thing. Yeah.
The 13th organization is the Indiana Music Education Association Foundation. Kathleen is our first reader.
There you are. Okay. Slide computer.
No.
All right, there we go. The strategic plan represented only an appendix, and it started on page 10, so I was a little confused as to what was the discussion in page 1 through 9. And cancel that. 70% of the budget was listed as miscellaneous. Again, I find that too high, 17% miscellaneous. I think that the executive director's participation in the leadership program is an excellent addition to the organization. And they have an impressive array and variety of programs for such a small staff. The Education Association Foundation and the Indiana Music Education Association relationships needs to be stated up front. I had to read through the whole thing to understand, because the grant came from the Indiana Music Education Association Foundation, and yet all the information was the anyway. I had to read all the way to the grant to see what their relationship was. Sometimes foundations are totally separate, and that if it was totally separate, then it would have to be all this information would have had to have been about the foundation, not the organization. But I think I figured it out. But again, I had to spend quite a bit of time figuring out what their relationship was. I'd like to have it up front. I'd like to see numbers attached to their programs, how many students participated in the Circle of State Song and the Folk Dance Festival, how many teachers participated year after year. I mean, it would just strengthen their application if they said, you know, teachers come back year after year because they love it. But they don't say that. And they don't, I didn't find numbers for how many students participated in either of those programs. Again, I would have liked to have seen some numbers, just how broad based it is. My daughter participated when she was younger, so I know that some children do, but I'd like to see more of a number. And maybe last year was this, and this year was this, and tell us if it's growing or if it's not. I thought that all of the material presented was good quality. Where's my, oh yeah, with the numbers. And so with the community engagements, and I'm not learning how grassroots outreach programs actually work. We have grassroots programs, but no real description as to, I mean, it's a buzzword. What is that for them? A direct plan to engage underserved people is not mentioned. So just would like to, and they may be very well doing all of that, but I didn't read it, so that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Kathleen. Heather is our second reader.
Yeah. I apologize if some of my points overlap, but there's other stuff mixed in there. I personally had a difficult time understanding this particular section of the mission statement, advocating for the best musical interests of all students. So I wasn't quite sure, is the organization advocating for music education to be within the classroom? Are they advocating for their programs to be in the classroom, or just music in general? So I just had a difficult time toward the beginning of the application, piecing some things together. And I would have liked a little more context within the history, purpose, and vision response. I'm not from the area, and just a note to remember that we only know the information that you include within the application. The programming seems to fulfill each of the targeted points within the mission statement of quality programs, professional development, and services, so that was good to see. Again, I noted the strategic plan didn't seem complete, and then it included goals from 2013 to 2016, but it was written in a way as though those goals still had to be implemented, as opposed to written in the sense of a wrap-up from former plans. So I wasn't sure if this was a current plan with the wrong years, or if it was a plan that had been executed, but there just wasn't information about what had been completed. So a little more information in regards to the strategic plan would have been helpful. Again, I noted there was a connection to the IPS school system. I'm not sure if those schools are primarily serving underserved populations, and if so, which. because that was the main tie within the access and diversity section. So just further defining that relationship and how the access is being provided. And I thought the print and promotional materials included within the application had a high level of artistic quality, but I did have a difficult time navigating the website with the various drop-down menus. I wasn't sure where to find things as I was trying to learn more about the program. So just something to consider to make your website a little more user-friendly, perhaps, to tie better in with your mission programming.
Thank you, Heather. Other comments? No? Okay, finalize your scores, please. Update comments if necessary.
It was frozen.
That's good.
Yeah.
I clicked it again though, and it was all good.
I was gonna say, if you refreshed it, I know that happened with hers, I don't know, I think it was the internet possibly.
It's finally, the internet's finally given up. It's just been bolting on us.
Right.
After 6 panels.
So close.
So close.
Okay, number 14. The organization name is the Kurt Vonnegut Museum and Library. Ursula is our first reader.
This organization has gone through a lot of difficulty over the last couple of years. I felt that they were able to maintain a very reasonable budget and fiscal management. They have a very diverse board, and they continue to strive in this area. An explanation is given for not having a strategic plan, and there's an addendum to their strategic plan that states the organization did conduct strategic planning sessions in 2017. And they're currently working on a new one. However, they do not have a current one that they are operating under. I felt like they have clearly identified and are targeting underserved communities and are working in a myriad of ways to accomplish engaging those communities. Even though they do not have a specific home right now, they're continuing to reach out to the people that they serve. I felt their arts education category hit the mark in terms of it was made clear what they do and who benefits. And furthermore, the educators that are providing the services seem very well qualified. I thought the artistic quality of all of their web information was very good quality, and again, sort of it hits the mark in what it needed to do.
Thank you, Ursula. Stephen is our second reader.
So I second many of the comments that Ursula just gave. And I agree, they're transparent about recent hardships. I thought the end of fiscal year 18 showed that they did like a lot of damage control to mitigate budgetary problems, which is nice to see. I would have liked, and I don't believe it was listed, but for fiscal year 19, grant income went up like $800,000. I'm not sure if those are grants if they've already been obtained, if that's what they're hoping to apply for new big grants. I'm just worried if that isn't obtained, what's going to happen. It might already be in hand. I just don't know based on what's provided. For community engagement, there was a bit of an emphasis given on making the new location a hangout spot that will serve more diverse audiences and more low-income residents. There's not a whole lot of detail provided as to like how that's going to happen or why. It didn't seem super strategic to me. It was just said they'll turn into a hangout spot that more diverse and low-income peoples will frequent. It also seems, I believe in the finances section they talked about, I think the organization originally intended to move to Massachusetts Avenue, so Indiana Avenue location seems, it just doesn't seem like it was an intentional choice to move there and create a hangout spot for people. If that happens, great. It would just be better served if there's more descriptions as to how they'll accomplish that. I liked all the arts education programs quite a lot in that they're large in scope. Like the free book handouts for Slaughterhouse 5 are really encouraging. In general, I think there could be more details on the specifics of like what teachers get out of the teaching Vonnegut workshops, like specifically what happens other than a workshop happens and how they know if teachers go back and teach Vonnegut or following any of the things they learned from those workshops. I'm not sure who qualifies for the scholarship program or I didn't see much about that at all. So more details about what the scholarship program is or if that's an actual arts education program. And then I don't have much new to add to the artistic quality section at the end. I actually really liked the video link they posted. I thought it was very on brand and on tone for Vonnegut. It's kind of an irreverent video, but thoughtful and engaging. So I like the video the best. So.
Thank you, Stephen. Other comments?
I was just interested, throughout the application, there are many mentions of the Slaughterhouse 5 distribution project, which is an amazing, very commendable project, but it seems to be something that's specific to this year. So I was interested to know if there was going to be momentum captured from this project and carried into the future, if this is a one and done, because again, it was a primary focus of several of the sections, and so there didn't seem to be much more beyond that project, and I don't think that that's the case. I'm sure there's many, many things going on, but I just wasn't really clear on all of those other things that were happening. So just a note about that, I suppose.
Well, I had, it seemed like their answer to every program was they're giving books to 8th graders. And I had to go to their website to learn the other great programs and events they had. So I'm kind of with you. It's like, oh, we're going to get books. Well, they do so much more. Right. But it wasn't quite that clear.
It wasn't within the narrative, yeah. And I guess I wanted a little more for the community engagement section too. In addition to the new location being a hangout, they mentioned that the book program is also going to build community engagement, but there weren't any other components mentioned other than giving somebody a book. So if there's going to be, book clubs or readings or additional things going on, it would have been helpful to have that included within the narrative.
Others? Okay, finalize your scores. Update online comments if necessary. We're good to go? All right. The final organization that submitted a grant proposal is the Great American Songbook, and Nancy's recusing herself.
She can get the door
if she can get out. And Stephen, you are our first reader, The Great American Songbook.
Great. Okay, so I have no questions about history or purpose, mission, everything like that was really well explained. It's great that it's Grammy Music Cultural, one of the Grammy Music Cultural affiliates, which brings a lot of recognition to Central Indiana. In general, though, I wanted some more information about who's being served by all the different sorts of like exhibitions and programs. So questions I had were, how many students are currently participating in the academy? How many have been served thus far? How many have actually gone on to study music or seek a career in performance, which is what the academy is striving to achieve. I just want to know if how successful they've been or if they track that. Same thing with the exhibitions, the archives, who's coming to use them, general audience numbers for the exhibitions. Is the archives, are those open to the public? Is that just for like scholars to come in and look at? So just more specifics for those sorts of programs. The board is large, giving 100%, and I think it sounds like it represents a diverse skill set and the demographics of the community, which is great. Or they're at least addressing any gaps they have. And I don't have the financials seem really reasonable and sound to me. They look great. The Asherwood Estate's obviously exciting. I think it's really fiscally responsible to invest that into a dramatic increase in the endowment, which will help sustain the organization forever. So, for community engagements, I think it's really clear that the organization is targeting seniors with Alzheimer's or similar diseases, as well as students as to communities, underserved communities that they're trying to participate more. They're also, I think, the two communities the organization already has historically targeted for engagement. So the programs seem really thought out. They survey everyone. They seem to have responded to evaluations from participants and adjusted how they planned them. One good example is keeping perfect harmony to 15 per session based off feedback from caregivers and the participants. So it seems like there's a good, they also have the partnerships with the Alzheimer's Association, CICF Senior Fund, they're doing social media marketing for students, things like that just seem like they're creating as two-way of a conversation as they can with these two groups. It's great they're offering scholarships for students with financial needs. And I think it's impressive they travel to exhibitions to schools, libraries like that, which dramatically, of course, increases access to people who otherwise could not attend. As far as arts education, it seems like the people producing the arts education programs are of really high quality. They have social workers involved in planning perfect harmony, music industry professionals doing Songbook Academy, things like that. The application could again be strengthened by just including some more specific objectives or learning outcomes. So, for example, it states field trips align with Indiana standards for language arts and music. I'm just curious what standards, what are the actual things people are doing to address those topics. It's somewhat unclear if the arts education programs are being provided for underserved communities. So just if they are, I just want more quantitative evidence or numbers of who's being served. What schools are planning field trips? I mean, how many students, with basic ideas or statistics like of the schools coming, like how many students are free to eat or reduced lunch, things that you can probably find from the Department of Education website if you're unsure. So that sort of inclusion of more details for that would be helpful. And then artistic quality at the end of the application are all really in line. I mean, everything I think reflects high quality arts experiences, community outreach with the senior community and the student population. So again, final comments, it would just be great to know more specifics about large school groups being served through field trips. Are those representing underserved populations? And just in general, who from the public and the community at large, how are they engaging with the organization? Are the exhibitions open all day? Do people come and go? Or those sorts of things tracked at all?
Thank you, Stephen, thanks. Christopher's our second reader.
I think Stephen captured a lot of what I would have to say. I did note that the income was over 80% contributed, which is not particularly diverse for funding streams. I also think that the use of out-of-state firms for public relations was a choice that wasn't very well explained, and I think that that's that is something that should be explained when applying for a state grant, is why you're using out-of-state services. I also agree a lot on the demographics and communities that I would like to see more specificity, especially in the arts education. There was a lot with the K through 12 population, there was a lot with the over 65 population, but in the 18 to 65 range, there wasn't a lot of explanation of which demographics were participating or how they could improve that kind of engagement. I also would have liked to have seen more explanation of who the educators were and how they are kind of contributing to the education programming. And I think those are the highlights of what I would have to contribute.
Okay, thank you, Christopher. Other comments?
In regard to the outcomes for arts education, I think something that could help to further strengthen this application would be to find some of those statistics. American for the Arts did a study, I don't remember what year, but about the benefits of the arts being integrated with like healthcare facilities or hospitals. So when looking at some of these programs where we're working with individuals or seniors who have Alzheimer's or dementia, it would just help to strengthen the application to include some of the statistics on the outcomes that are being gained. But overall, I found it to be a strong application.
Others? Okay, finalize your scores, update comments if needed. This concludes the fiscal year 2020 Regional Initiative Grant Panel for this afternoon. Thank you.